Full start.
It is a false start. You know, that tricked me, Brett. It really did. It tricked me. However, I'm never out my stride. There's never a scenario where something like this throws me off my stride. So, welcome everybody. I think we're live. Wonderful to see you all. I'm very, very excited to be having this conversation because this is an area that I have a limited amount of knowledge on. And these are the best conversations for me to participate in because I learn so much from the panelists and the guests that are on here. Today, folks, we're going to be talking about the world that we see today, which is how do you hire people in a global context, specifically UK employers? How do we take advantage of some of the opportunities that are out there in terms of untapped talent? And we're talking particularly about Africa. How do UK companies tap into the talent in that continent and start hiring people out there, whether it be remote or relocate to the UK? We've got a fantastic lineup, brilliant guests that have that experience. I've served companies that have had legal experience also on terms of work permits, visas, and so on. So in the next hour or so, you should be able to walk away from this with much more confidence if this is an area that you wanted to explore. So great to be here with you. And let me first of all bring on one of our wonderful hosts, without which this wouldn't have happened. So let's bring on Brett Jones. Brett, great to see you. Wonderful to see you on screen, man.
Hey, Hung. Yeah, thanks. Thanks for the great intro. So yeah, I thought I'm also really excited to be here today. I think it's going to be great. I thought I'd just give a quick intro on me, a little bit about OfferZen, and then about our partnership with Localyze. So I'm one of the co-founders at OfferZen, and I've been in tech recruiting for quite a while. I don't know about if it's as long as Hung or not, but since about 2006. And so, you know, my, I guess, claim to fame there was I was one of the very few tech recruiters out there who had a comp sci degree. At the moment at OfferZen now, I'm setting up our strategic partnerships function. And yeah, so for those of you that don't know, for those of you that don't know, OfferZen is essentially a community-first talent marketplace where companies can hire developers across, I think it's like 18 countries now, and particularly in the EMEA time zone. We're a little bit geeky at OfferZen, as you can kind of see from my shirt here. This is one of the swag things we do, that we call the EMEA time zone Middle Earth. So yeah, our goal here is really to help companies all over Middle Earth hire talent from the whole of Middle Earth. And one of the core things we believe at OfferZen is that great talent is everywhere, but opportunity isn't. And so our mission is really to connect talented developers across Middle Earth with awesome opportunities, across the whole time zone. So what I'm really excited about as well is our partnership with Localyze and the team there, and how together we're helping companies take advantage of hiring the really amazing developer talent that's out there. And together we're sort of moving one step closer towards building a borderless world together. Sorry, that's my child excited that my wife has just walked in. The joys of working from home. Yeah, so really excited about working with Localyze and helping companies be able to hire from anywhere. What we're doing together as part of this, and we'll drop the links in the chat now, Localyze are offering an exclusive discount on their service and being able to relocate people to anywhere. And if you buy one case from them, you will get another one free. So we'll drop that in the link there now. OfferZen are also offering a special offer where you can get 25% off your first hire on OfferZen, and yeah, the links will be in here now. So
fantastic, Brett. Wonderful to have that intro, and thank you very much on behalf of the community for these offers, by the way. I think maybe I wonder whether we could set up some sort of movement where we encourage sort of vendors to do a little bit more of this, where we set something up and try and create some scenarios where it's easier for folks to come and use their service. I think that would be a wonderful thing to do. So Brett, he's left us now, so nothing further ado, let's bring on our panelists. Let's get on with the conversation. Have a think, everybody. I'd really be interested to know, actually, if you could put it in the chat, have you recruited from Africa before. Is this something that you want to do? And if you haven't done it yet, why not? Share some of your thoughts in the chat here, folks, because it'll be interesting for us, I think, just to get a bit of a flavor as to what the challenges are, so that we can deal with that as we go forward. There should also be a question function at the bottom. So in the same place where you're chatting, if you have specific questions for the guests or for this particular challenge, use the ask the questions feature. We'll get to that towards the end of this webinar. So we have our guests on here, so let's do some quick intros. Why don't we start with you, Akbar? Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, sir?
Hey, how you doing, guys? My name is Akbar Karenga. I am founder of Marusi, a talent and people consultancy, but I've also scaled internationally at Education First, Metafy, and Storyblock. I'm originally from Africa myself. I was born in Burundi, Central Africa, in Middle Earth, as Brett just said a minute ago.
Fantastic. And we also have Katrina Hutchinson O'Neill. Katrina, great to see you again. For the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Hung. So I spent about 15, 16 years leading talent acquisition in-house for companies like HCL, RBS Nationwide, leading global complex teams. Made a crazy decision nearly 4 years ago to leave that behind, set up my own business, which is Join Talent. And today we're about 260 people across 21 countries, including South Africa, which is our second biggest location. So really happy to be involved in the conversation today.
Yeah, and great to see. I think your innovation, obviously many innovations, but one of the most important innovations was actually doing what we're talking about, tapping South African talent and getting those recruiters into your business. I thought that gave you a competitive advantage against the stuff that you had around you. So evidence right here, that's the case. And finally, we have Hamza Hussein as well. Hamza, great to see you. Can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do, sir?
Thanks a lot, Hung. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm a UK immigration case manager currently working for Localyze. My expertise lies within the last 3 years. I've been in global immigration, currently working for UK sponsorship, how easy it is to basically hire foreign talent into the UK, bring them in, and I'm going to be talking about what kind of different rules, recent changes have actually made it more easier for us to hire talent abroad, if that makes sense. All right.
It does make sense. Let's start off with a big question. And probably none of us will necessarily have the definitive answer, but I'd be really interested in perspectives. What would you say is the situation with regards to UK employers hiring African talent? Do we do it? And if so, who does it well? And if not, why not? Like, what is the situation as you see it currently? Any thoughts on this? Perhaps Akbar, we go with you to begin with.
I think there's a distinct lack of creativity around it being an option, and there's usually an internal thing regarding a limiting belief on why or how we can't do it. There's been legislation that's been in place for a relatively long time. There's ways of working that have been outlined and led on for now a decade and a half. So I think we need to kick up the butt to see an opportunity that's right there.
Yeah, very interesting. And I like the term self-limiting belief, because I do think that's actually a big thing. It's often not in the mind frame at all. When people make decisions as to where we're hiring people, I wonder whether, Africa appears in the mindscape of a lot of UK employers and UK TA people. What's your view on this, Katrina? Obviously, you've had the recent experience of building JT with a big sort of component in South Africa. But back in the corporate era, the corporate days, not so long ago, 4 or 5 years ago, what was the attitude in those big companies at that point with regards to African talent?
To be honest, it wasn't even on the radar. If I look at the teams that I was managing back in my corporate world, where we were looking to offshore, nearshore, we were very much looking at Eastern Europe and India, perhaps moving into Southern Asia. but Africa was rarely on the map. South Africa did. I think there was a bit of a call center boom there back in the kind of noughties, and I was in Northern Ireland at the time. We were having the same boom. So South Africa and Northern Ireland were competing for all of the business. But I think the world has moved on in some ways. Sadly, it hasn't in others, and I can speak from firsthand experience even today. And we've got an amazing team, much more stable team as well in South Africa. Our attrition in the rest of the world is pretty impressively low, but in South Africa, it's virtually zero because we pay pretty much equitable to UK rates. So we're paying incredibly well in the market, which we feel is the right thing to do. But we still have some companies that we talk to who instantly have a reaction to a give me anybody in Europe, but I don't want to take somebody in South Africa. And that's a real challenge that we face into it very passionately and with great strength and vigor. And we have amazing clients all over Europe who are hugely passionate about their phenomenal team members in South Africa, even some who have let their internal team members go recently, but kept our SA team members on. But it's still an uphill struggle. So I can only imagine what it must feel like to be domiciled in that market.
That's actually really interesting. Like you've introduced very directly, maybe here's some prejudice, let's call it that. Some certainly, a priori presumptions. Firstly, it's out of the question in the mind, and when it's actually suggested, it's batted away because of I don't know what. Like, what is the reason behind
GDPR? That's the comment. Just say GDPR and it covers everything. It's all the GDPR, and I'm like, well, let me spill you on that one. We're working with, and I'm not allowed to say obviously all the names, but household name leaders in the tech industry and other sectors. They have no issue with it, but very often it's smaller to medium-sized companies, and it's just I think it feels far away.
I think it's
conscious discrimination. It's almost like a subconscious xenophobia, almost. I don't know that place. It feels far away and very foreign. And I've maybe culturally heard things about not great experiences in other offshoring. I don't know what's going on in people's heads, but we're trying to work through it in some cases.
All right, let's set the scene and let's just speak frankly. I think it's important that we're able to do that in this context. Leaving aside the recruiting aspect, I think a big part of the problem might well be the media coverage of African topics in general, because it's very clear that if you looked at Africa is a huge continent. It's like 5 times the size of Europe. It's got nearly 1 billion people, I believe. A huge diversity, lots of things go on in it. And obviously some things aren't brilliant, some things are great, but the media coverage is almost all about the stuff that isn't going well. And you hear these stories, and I just wonder in Europe, in the UK, we've just imbibed all of this over the decades, and all we hear is negative stories. Guess what? That's got to seep into the mindset of TA people and leaders of business when they think, you know what, this seems high risk because I'm hearing all this, or they may not even be able to map it to a particular article or a particular news story, but they've heard it sort of always in that background. So I think general kind of media treatment of Africa is a significant component. We need to increase our media literacy generally and start listening to other African stories and other African voices, perhaps, because there's a lot more to say than what you might see, if you like, I hate to use the term mainstream media, but there's a lot more from Africa than we hear from those particular sources. Okay, Hamza, let's go to you. Now, can you give us any overview? Maybe this is not something you've got access to, Hamza, but I'd love to know, like, do you have any idea of the numbers of African people who were born in Africa with a nationality of countries in Africa that have moved to the UK? Do you have any idea of what the numbers might be there?
I think jumping in on the topic, it's quite interesting because recent trends or cases that I've seen over the past 3 years, relocating to the UK is mainly based on Europeans coming to the UK. Then you've got the Asian side of countries coming to the UK, whether it be India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and you've got like South Asia, and then you've got the Americans. So the Central America, North America, we've got those coming to the UK. But Africa is a total rarity. It's like it's a hidden gem, and employers are not really interested when it comes to hiring from there. I would say over the previous 3 years, if I have ever had a case, it's probably 1 or 2 on an occasion. And just looking at the passport. So as a case manager, when you get a case from other countries, you always want to go through all the documents. I would look at the passport to see how it differs from country to country. And I believe I've probably come across South Africa just once. A bit of Nigerian applications I have seen, but that's about it. If I was to level it on a graph, I'd say it's currently towards the bottom, maybe even less than 1% at some point. So the numbers are quite low when it comes from hiring from Africa.
I've got good news for you, Hamza. So NHS last quarter for nurses, 1/3 of all nurses employed last quarter were from the continent of Africa. And that's moved since Brexit from having a mostly EU candidate base to now being a way more international, and Africa being a large chunk of that.
I wonder whether the public sector might be more sensitive to the requirements here, because if you're like a corporate business that, you know, you're going to have a smaller sort of worldview because you're caring only about your business, and the volumes probably are not going to be massive, and there's alternatives as we've described. But if you're the NHS, which I think is one of the world's biggest employers, that suddenly has
Fifth biggest
employer on the world, and it's suddenly just like with Brexit cut off, I don't know how many potential people that work in the NHS. You have, like, whoever's in charge of sourcing strategically at the NHS has to be thinking, you know what, we've got to pull the stops out. So great to see that they're advancing in this. It would be great in future actually to bring someone from the NHS in here to see how they made that decision and how they kind of do the sourcing and what the talent intelligence is. So great, firstly, to see there's some movement there. And very interesting from your side, Hamza, you're saying that still case by case, it is very low. Is it a scenario, is there any legal challenges that prevent this in particular? Like, what is the current state of affairs with regards to non-UK citizens moving to the UK? What do employers have to do?
Yeah, it's quite simple and straightforward, I'd say. So nowadays, we've got the sponsorship license process. You know, a company applies for the sponsorship license. You know, you can get your approval on a fast track basis within 10 days. Give a talent the job offer, issue a certificate of sponsorship, make an application, and they can come. Now, if you look at what kind of benefits we have from Africa, and what I see is majority of Africa speak English. They're not coming from a country where English is like their third language, or it's something where they have to do an English language test. Yes, some countries out there will have to do an English language test. There's no doubt about it to meet the criteria. But from an employer's perspective, it's quite easy to actually get people in the UK now.
All right, Hamza, let me interrupt real quick because I personally don't know this. So I want to make sure I've got this absolutely right. So what we're saying is a UK employer needs to apply for a license a priori, right? So before you even talk to anybody, you need to apply for, and I think Akbar shared the link there. It's a sponsor license, which basically does what? It gives you the license to sponsor somebody, right? It gives you the opportunity. Without this, I can't sponsor anybody. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. So it's part of basically the Home Office compliance procedures. They want to keep on track every person that comes in to the UK on a route which allows them to go towards settlement. Now, the sponsorship license, it's a way of giving the major responsibility to the employer to take care of your employee. It's a form of protection for both the actual company and the actual individual. What used to happen back in the days is a lot of people would get job offers, they'd come to the UK and then not getting paid right, not following the correct laws. Some people are obviously looking for jobs elsewhere, they're going missing. Home Office is confused. Where's the responsibility? So instead of the state taking that responsibility, the companies now take on that responsibility. And in essence, it's a good responsibility because we follow the compliance checks. You know, it's so easy for a company to issue a certificate of sponsorship, get all the information already in, just with like one certificate number, you make a visa application. There's not even many documents that are involved. So over the course of the previous 5-6 years, I'd say a lot of the documents have now been cut out. And what we're seeing is a new trend. Over the next few years, Home Office has actually announced that they are going to be watering down the documents, the procedures, making it even more easier for employers to hire from abroad. After Brexit, post-Brexit, this is what the UK wants. They want to make sure we get a good number of migration in the UK. You know, a lot of people, a lot of talents coming in, and they just want to start easing off the process now and making it more easier for talents to relocate, making it easier for companies to come through, and bring in more talent.
All right, let me walk me through this. So I have no idea what I'm doing, which by the way is fairly standard, folks. But let's say I have a business and I want to hire somebody. First thing I got to do is hit that link that Akbar shared, and I need to apply for this license. How hard is it for me to get that? Is there interviews? Is there thousands of pounds I've got to spend? What do I have to do?
All right. It will depend on two things. So number one, whether you're a small organization or a large organization. I'd say if you're a small organization, if you've got 50 or less employees at the moment, you're considered a small organization. We'll take this scenario first, and then we can obviously go into the large organizations later. You need 4 documents. And these 4 documents are like the golden nuggets. I'd say you need a UK bank account. You'd also need like your company address, where's your office space, like a tenancy agreement. Number 3, HMRC document. Are you on the pay-as-you-earn wrote on HMRC? And the last document is quite important. You need employer's liability insurance. If you can get me these 4 documents, let's make an application, submit it, pay for fast track. You then get approved your sponsorship license. Now, part of the sponsorship license and a major chunk of this is basically following through compliance. So making sure that you are a trustworthy employer, that the Home Office can trust you with hiring foreign talent. Now, you need 3 people in the organization. Well, 1 person to manage everything. Ideally, we'd always say 2, or your third person, you can also put in like a legal services firm. So even Localyze can come on as your legal representatives. Once you've got your sponsorship license approved, we've got it in our hands, we've got the approval, we make a request under something called the SMS, which is a sponsor management system. We'll ask for a certificate of sponsorship, and we basically embed in all of the details of the international talent who we've offered a job. Let's say it's someone based in Nigeria or someone based in South Africa, anywhere around the world. We just get their passport details, what kind of job they're doing, how they're coming to the UK, what kind of salary we're going to pay them, put all those details in, we get that issued. Usually turnaround is 24 hours. With that reference number, we then make an application for the visa to then travel to the UK. Now, I know there's going to be loads more questions. Feel free to ask through. I think I did whiz through this.
So just to jump in with Hamza,
go ahead, Akbar, yeah.
would be, so this turnaround time compared to the old way, you'd have to do either a 30 or 60-day labor market test, and it'll be super manual, moving stuff around. So this new way that Hamza is talking about is mostly digital. You register once, and the pricings are super clear going forward in terms of what you need. So it's no longer your grandfather's visa process compared to how it was before.
It does sound a lot faster, because before you needed to do stuff like you got to advertise the job, you got to prove like there's like a native worker could have done it, and there's all kinds of jiggery pokery required here. So this is so first things first. It sounds like almost every business will be able to do this, right? Because you're the way in which you're saying with those 4 documents. As soon as you said that, Hamza, I thought, you know what, this is going to be a nightmare. But actually, no. Like if you set up a limited company, you've got at least 3 of those.
If you're trading, you've got it.
If you're trading as a business, you've got them. Then you apply once. How much does it cost? Like, what's the number?
The cost of the license is about £536.
For what? 1 year, yearly, or how does it work?
So you get the license approved for 4 years. After that, it's a simple renewal process. 4 years is quite good. I would say that's like amazing, because one thing that we got to note here is, let's say we get the license for 4 years, but we're sponsoring someone and we want them here for 5 years. They will get a 5-year visa approved.
Yeah, so the length of it will give them that opportunity to prove. That's a really important point. Is there a limitation to the numbers of hires I can make in that period of time?
So it differs sometimes. So if you're hiring from within the UK, there's limitations. Now, this is the interesting part. If let's say there's someone in the UK and they're a student or they're already on a sponsor license, for someone to hire within the UK, that same candidate, there's limitations. So you have to go through the SMS system. You apply and you request the Home Office before you ask for the certificate of sponsorship for that person. So you're going to go in, you're going to say, hey, we've got someone who's already in the UK, they're already on a temporary route or a working route, and we want to hire them. Their turnaround is usually 2 to 3 days. You get that approved and then you can go. But if you're hiring from outside the UK, the interesting thing is there's no limitations.
That's interesting. Yeah, so it's probably all about trying to make sure people don't overstay or whatever it is. But it sounds to me like a small bit of additional admin that you could easily get around. So all of this sounds pretty good. I mean, it seems pretty interesting. This SMS system, is this is it a website? Like,
Yes,
can we have a look at it?
.gov.uk portal, yes.
Can someone share that into the chat? I'd like to have a look at that at some point, because I do think the opportunity is there to really create a digital experience for everybody, and it makes a huge difference going through. Katrina, as a person that's probably now employing more than small business, 250, probably you're on your way to being a much larger organization. Is this a journey you've gone through? Because I know you've actually put people in South Africa, you're putting the jobs in South Africa, but have you migrated people, have people relocated to the UK as a result of working with JT at all?
So this is, I think, a bit of a divisive topic in some ways. I think there are absolutely a bunch of jobs where you have to physically be there to do those jobs. You have to be on site. Nurses, which Akbar mentioned, being a primary example. I'm not a big fan of economic geographic migration. Look at history, people. Never has worked well whenever we've tried to move people around the world. Why would we do that in any country? I would rather keep people at home with their families and have money going into those communities. We do not relocate people. And it's a big thing. Why did I set Join Talent up as remote in the first place? I'm not going to say this is comparable to international relocation, but it's because several times in my career, I had to choose between taking a promotion that I was offered, which came with the strings of I had to move small children and a husband and leave a home behind and go and live somewhere else in the UK, or not take the promotion. That's crap. It's it's the modern world. It shouldn't happen. So I've got very strong views on this. I would much rather that where it's humanly impossible, especially given how easy it is to do now with employer of record models and a number of different companies out there supporting that companies looked first and foremost to hire in an almost open way. There are certain countries where it will be more difficult because of trade embargoes and restrictions. I get it, but where possible, to hire in a kind of location open way. So my dogs have just come running in the background and distracted me there. Apologies. And keep jobs in countries, like even in the UK, Hung. Never mind the international bit. I think the de-urbanization of economy that's come through COVID, where all of a sudden it's possible for people to earn great salaries and not have to be in a city centre, is phenomenal in regenerating less invested in areas. Same goes for other countries. So I'm delighted that we can bring the equivalent of UK salaries to 50, 60 people based in South Africa. And for those people, in the main part, for them to have a significant improvement to their quality of life because they're earning more than they did before. That feels like a better answer to me than for jobs that do not need to be done physically in a particular location, breaking up families or forcing people to migrate. I feel a little bit strongly about this one, Hung.
So I can see, Katrina, but what I like about your journey is that you've actually gone and lived that, which I think is really, really wonderful, because I do agree with you on this. When I was kind of even internal migration, this was a challenge for a lot of people. I grew up in the northeast of the UK. London was never an idea for me. It was like, why would I ever go down south, quote unquote? And very, very loyal to the local community, local network, until I realized, there's actually no economic opportunity here at all. and have to make a big trade-off in order to make that migration. Now, imagine how that would look like globally, which has been the case for such a long time. People do have to relocate. I guess Akbar, Hamza, myself, we're all examples of that. Our parents had to do that move and leave a lot of stuff behind. Maybe the future world is going to be a redistribution, and the jobs go to the people rather than the people go to the jobs. So I totally get what you're saying, Katrina. But again, there's a division, isn't there? How digital is the job? What is the there's probably a time zone issue at some point, where even a digital job might be difficult to do because the time zone is not right. And of course, we mentioned things like the NHS before. There's going to be a bunch of work that does require physical on-site.
Folks, I think Hannah was just going to say that, and the great thing is about most of Africa, the time zone issue is not an issue. What I would say, and listen, there's always two bits to it. There are challenges, and I totally get why it is, but employment law in South Africa, for example, is very, very different to employment law in Europe. I'm so sorry about these dogs in the background. They're very feisty. They're so naughty.
You know what? So long as they're fighting and not doing something else, I think I'm okay with it.
No, they're sisters. They're just pulling each other's
ears. Are they okay? Yeah, I was going to say.
The employment law in South Africa is very, it's almost trade unionist in the way that it's orchestrated. And I totally get it. It's because I think historically there may have been many employers that took advantage, et cetera, et cetera. But that does mean when you're not working in that way, you've still got a lot more constraints around things that should be easier as a business, but you've just got to learn to work with that. The other big issue that we have in South Africa, and I don't know how endemic this is across other countries in Africa, Brett had at the start, is load shedding. Absolute killer. We have to give our employees in South Africa the choice of either the money to go and buy themselves a generator, or we buy it for them if that's easier. But every single person we have has to have a generator. They have to have a 4G SIM, and that can become something that some companies say that's, why would I put up with that when I don't have to elsewhere? For me, it's because the talent equation outweighs the inconvenience of that. But there are infrastructure challenges in some areas of Africa that do need to be overcome.
Yeah,
yes. Go
Katrina,
ahead,
yeah, even to that point there. So when I was sharing the news about this webinar, I gave a snapshot from the World Bank about internet penetration 10 years ago to now. It's definitely trending in the right direction, and it sometimes even varies country to country and even city to city. So I definitely agree with you there, like thinking and breaking up Africa as one place into many places and many different local ISP realities, and sometimes even change relatively quickly. So for example, if you are a social media based business and you had a large Nigerian contingent, that getting shut down regarding the withdrawal of Twitter might have affected what you thought you were able to deliver as a company.
You know, that's very interesting. It's almost like we're starting to observe or use data more than just like political lines on a map, but things like what is the internet distribution, what is the bandwidth, as you say, what is the political environment with regards to access to different technologies, and that actually might determine where you decide to either hire people from or push the jobs to, because it's relevant. It's very relevant in terms of how I'd love to see a global map actually on internet speeds. If we could do it per city or per region, that would be really interesting to look at.
Numbeo has one. So I'll share a link.
I was going to say, ping it in there. I think that would be useful.
The worst I've had is the Cotswolds in the UK. There's miles as a crow flies from London, and you can't get any Wi-Fi.
Forget about that. If you go to Soho or Chinatown in the middle of London, like you can't even get 3G, 4G. It's like literally dead zone. I don't know why that is. So whenever I'm there, no one can't speak to anyone.
That's the MI5 headquarters around the corner, Hung.
Yeah, well, actually, Stephanie, quite right. I think Berlin is tough as well. And to be honest with you, the US has got plenty of problems out there, particularly if you don't have a local SIM. I mean, I was in New York earlier this year, and I was walking around for 3 days effectively without internet. And it's not really the place where you want to be without internet, to be honest with you, because, you know, signage, come on, New York, what's going on? I could improve that. Anyway, so let's kind of scenario back to where we're at as UK employer, and I'm thinking about, okay, let's hire talent in wherever, and maybe agnostic, and I'm starting to see talent come through. Now, going on to Hamza's sort of timeline, sort of workflow, apply to the visa first. You've got to have that. Be interested to know what percentage of UK employers have actually done this. Can you give us a number, Hamza? What is the percentage of UK employers that have actually got this ability to do a sponsorship?
I believe years ago we were quite low, with about 4 to 6% of companies had the license. This is actually going back 3 years ago. Most recently, and post-Brexit, I believe the number's now gone up. So if I'm correct, we're currently about 35% of companies. It's not much, it's not very, very high. I can give you an actual number just shortly. But
yeah, go and find it. 35%. You know what? That's actually stupid. I mean, it really, I mean, even if you have no intent, it's like you might as well do it, because you don't know. If you're posting a job someplace, you might just get a brilliant applicant, and then suddenly you realize you could have done this basic bit of admin that should be just a hygiene factor. It costs 500 quid. So if you're running a business, 500 quid is not a huge expense for 4 years. Just go and apply for the damn thing. It should be a default thing. It's like a couple of a checklist of things to do when you're setting up a business. Go ahead and do it. So I think there's maybe some education, generally speaking, we need to do, and perhaps a conversation like this is going to help us with it. Okay, so, but when I go and sponsor, I need to do it per candidate, right? So I don't get an allocation of, oh, you've got 4 slots, you can just give visas out. I think the Netherlands do that, but in the UK, I've got to identify the person and make an application based on that person's passport information that I've submitted to SMS, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So it can work both ways as well. Recently, as I mentioned earlier, that there are some changes that are coming along now. So you've got like you apply for like a certificate of sponsorship batch, which actually makes it easier. You don't have to put in all of their details. You just put in the job role, what kind of salaries you're paying, their start dates and end dates. You'll get a batch. Once you've got the batch approved, whether it's like, let's say a batch of 15, for example, then you can start assigning them one by one to each person and their passport. So again, they are making it quite digital, bringing in a lot of companies, and how they're just easing the process. And I think that's quite interesting to see from the Home Office, because go back a few years, it wasn't like this. Akbar mentioned earlier as well, it was a lot of stuff to do. It wasn't digital. There were a lot of compliance checks. And adding on to earlier, there was about 4% of companies that were on it. The reason why that is because of the compliance checks. Finding documents just to find out like what kind of documents do we need to apply for the license. You'd have to go through nearly about 600 pages of policy guidances just to understand, okay, so I need these 4 documents. And within these 4 documents, I need to make sure that these are X, Y, Z, we're hitting the spot on these. But now it's like, speak to an advisor, they'll tell you straight, bring these documents, let us assess them. Within half an hour, you'll have your reply. These are absolutely fine. They're competent enough. If not, why don't you change this, tweak this around? Let's make the application.
Yeah, so I think
as times have changed, we've seen that.
I think generally speaking, people eyes glaze over when there's some administration to do. And let's not forget, by the way, folks, a lot of people who may need to do this are operating recruiters. So they've got like their normal job to do. And if you're confronted with any additional bit of admin, you might just immediately say no. I remember working back in my agency days, I generally had the attitude. So, this is a US candidate. No, it's like, because as an agency recruiter, why would I go the extra mile? It would actually take me less time to try and find a UK candidate or an EU candidate, because I didn't have to go through the rigmarole. However, the current environment that the UK has found itself in is that we're out of the single market. We've got a massive candidate shortage, and this needs to be baked into how we operate now. We don't have the luxury of saying no to candidates based on we can find a local resource. Actually, there's going to be a Brainfood Live this Friday. We're going to be talking about where are the missing millions of workers. Global problem. Where are the missing millions? And we've got labor market economists from all kinds of places that are going to come in. We've got a director of EMEA economic research at Indeed joining us. We've got Dr. Sarah Ali again, chief data economist at Radency. We've got Tony Wilson, who's the director of the Institute of Employment Studies. They're going to just explain a couple of theories. Why can't we find any candidates? And this is a must listen for anybody who's also on the fence about whether you apply for a sponsorship license or whatnot, because I think we need to, is the bottom line. Okay, let's drill down to things that residual perceptions about African talent. So certain countries seem to be getting a shoe in, right? So I think over the period of time where we've been in Europe, generally speaking, most people in the UK would say, sure, you know, guys from Greece, no problem. So we've got used to, we've been habituated from this. That's fine. Maybe through a big Indian migration and South Asian migration also. Again, people seem very okay with it. But a person from Burundi, like Akbar back in the day, people might not know anything about Burundi.
It's true. It's true.
So what do we do about that as employers, as business people? Like, is there a way in which we can kind of bridge that confidence gap?
So I'm assuming that we're speaking to talent people who are deciding the top of the funnel of many of their organizations. You control what people see at the hiring manager level. So you need to be the check. You need to be a little bit selfish, where you've got a total addressable market of people that you can hire for, and the addressable market of who you do hire from. Find amazing people, realize you might be able to get a more experienced person or this or that, and that's what you present. Recruitment is like a box of chocolates. There's only 16 choices maximum, basically, regarding top of the funnel. Also, this you're touching on like a larger culture piece. So me and Katrina, we've scaled remote first businesses, and that has to taken deliberate processes and celebrating and understanding difference, flexibility of ways of working. You can't supplant it in, and this will be something that maybe you need EVP work to really position yourself internally. Maybe this will be something team by team. So is it your customer service team that will really need to see this traction internally before internal people like, oh my God. Then we have to touch on a little bit of salary transparency and salary consistency, role to role, country to country. Are you ready to have those complicated conversations? But as the TA person, you can control the shortlist that you give your hiring manager.
Yeah, and this is where having all of the administrative stuff sorted before you even think about the requisition, that's the essential case, because you've already done it. It's giving you 4 years. That should give you a global license. Basically, you as a recruiter will open up, you expand your total addressable market, so you can bring in people from all places. And by the way, if there's language concerns, etc., again, I think Akbar, you're right. It's up to the recruiter to alleviate that. And these days with video calls, you can record a bunch of stuff. There's loads of great technology where, you know, you can prove to the manager, it's not just a 2D CV, you can show them a recording of the interview you've conducted, and you can hear for yourself what the quality of the language is or the communication level. So we have the tooling, it seems, to be able to plug some of these gaps where previously we didn't. Again, rewind 20 years ago, it would be very much harder because you've got a CV and that's it. And you've got a really strong arm in here. We've got a lot more ability to evidentialize, if that's even a word, but let's invent it if it isn't. If we evidentialize these people, create them, move them from a 2D resume into a hone it. Yeah, do you know the product? Very interesting. So there's stuff out there which can really help. So I guess the message for recruiters watching this would be, you know what, do you have a talent shortage? Yes, you do, because every time we talk about sourcing, everyone signs up to sourcing show. So clearly we have a problem top of the funnel. If you get this stuff right, you put yourself in a position to recruit globally, that's going to do a huge amount to solve some of the problems that you have. Okay, very, very interesting. Shall we talk about particular places in Africa that are known for certain skills? We've talked about South Africa a lot. And I think there's lots of reasons for that, simply because of the population size, the language skills. There's a lot of a genealogy still in many populations in South Africa, and also I think, as someone mentioned there, kind of a willingness to relocate also into UK, Europe. Are there any other parts of Africa that we can identify and say, you know what, without being massively stereotypical, but getting people from here is really good for this type of role? I mean, are we able to make any generalizations like that?
Yes, so a couple of countries have through Kenya is a great example. So the first ISP pipe actually lands in Mombasa from Asia. So the connectivity there is super strong. English is a first language. Rwanda has parlayed a lot of UN funding to really upgrade their ISP network, and they've joined the Commonwealth. So English is now being taught across the system from post-16. Ghana, Nigeria have been traditional countries for immigration to the UK. It's bang on GMT as well. Egypt it's got a state-run ISP in Vodafone, and also a lot of people, depending on age, are trilingual English, French, and Arab as well. Those are a couple of, I'd say, highlights. But then there is slightly unusual ones. Depends on, for example, what type you hire for. I've helped a lot of businesses who maybe need their lead generation team for a SaaS product, and they need French skills, and that's allowed them to capture so many different people. The French-speaking one, especially in France, they viewed North Africa and they called it like the metropole. So anyone who's from Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco, you see so many easy ways for them to start building business if you're looking for French-speaking clients in terms of BD.
Yeah, and I guess even the more you do, the more you'll learn in terms of the populations that could really be a talent center for you. It's almost one of the, you can imagine a scenario if you hire one person from one country, that person will educate your business as to what's available there, and suddenly you might find there's a hidden seam that no one else is talking
That's what
about.
happened in Morocco with my company. We hired our first front-end developer from Casablanca, and then he referred 3 other people. So we had like a whole like mini Metafy in around Casablanca very quickly.
And that's literally what happened with us as well. My first employee at Join Talent was my assistant, who joined me part-time, and she's now our head of business operations for the whole company. And now we've got our CFO there, we've got our head of IT, as well as the team. So sometimes it does take that, Akbar, doesn't it? It's that one person that you hire and you go, this person's great, can we get more people like them? And it goes from there. Yeah, absolutely. And Tunde, thank you very much. Andela are probably the most famous example of a software company. I think they're a software school, aren't they? That are just trying to create sort of a really digital powerhouse in Africa. It's very interesting to track where they are and where they go. Let's talk about the logistics of relocation. So I've done all of the things. I found a great candidate. We're going to offer this person a job, but there's still this move to make. Let's imagine we're going to move them to the UK. We want to do that. How do we do it? I mean, is it a case where we start off remote first and relocate eventually, or do we just say, you know what, we're an in-office business, let's bring you in and go for it? Any experience to share? All I'm going to say is we obviously support clients with this every day as well. And we did a lot of that during the kind of COVID time where people couldn't relocate. Like, it's really difficult to go, I'm going to hire you in country and pay equitable salary to the destination company, and then expect when it comes 3 to 6 months down the line that you're still going to want to relocate when you've already shown me that you can do the job really well remotely. I think you're either all in or all out on that one. Thoughts on that, Akbar?
I'm always like remote first as the first initial one there, because it just allows the speed definitely there. And it just, if you have a good employee of record partner, I struggle to find use cases. There is sometimes where I've seen maybe internal promotion, and maybe internally in a company, the VP of, or the leader of, or the director of would need to be relocated back to London. But if you are, again, salary transparency and salary consistency, then you've saved yourself the politics of being able to do that. And it's a relatively easy process if you follow somebody like Hamza in terms of his steps.
Yeah, and Hamza, what do you see people? I mean, Localyze obviously do move people. Is there have you guys developed the best practice that you think, you know what, in terms of generally speaking, the people that have most success in terms of retention, having hired and moved this person, is there a rough guide, best things to do?
I think it all comes down to company culture. It's considered with the company and the talent. They usually have a preference. Remote first companies, one thing I'd say is a great benefit is that they give you the option. You know, you have the option, like we've got XYZ office in, I don't know, 14 destinations. You know, we'd give you like 8 destinations, which are the best ways or the quickest and most safest ways to go. You know, what do you say? It's usually under mutual agreement, and it depends on what the company culture brings to it. A lot of times we've seen a lot of relocations within Europe. It could be someone wants to just travel to Spain, see how it's going out there. Someone wants to travel to Germany. You know, they've been in the hot weather for quite some time. They want to face different kind of weather. And sometimes it's just coming to the UK. They say, you know, we've been in Europe. We want to see what the UK looks like post-Brexit. And yeah, it all just comes down to company culture, as mentioned.
Yeah, case by case. And if you're, I guess the optimal company to do this would be ones that are flexible in terms of where you want to work, but also have office locations in different places. I mentioned earlier, I think I was in Madrid for a period, and I met a few people there. And the lady I was speaking to had options. It was like, look, you can be in Munich, you can be in Madrid, you can be in Barcelona, you can actually stay where you are. And it was like, that's actually a pretty good set of options, like very compelling offer for the candidate, because it basically means you're not forced, you know, in your example, Katrina, where, you know what, here's an absolute, this is the deal, the lockdown, you have to be here, nowhere else, no sense of decision making or agency there. Okay, great. What are the top tips before we go to the questions? By the way, folks, if you've got any questions for our guests, now is the time to ask them. We're running out of time. Use the ask a question feature. We're going to get to them in a minute. But the final thing to talk about is, what should an employer do when your hire like lands in the country, like day one? Like what is the best practice there? Do you meet them at the airport? I mean, do you give the concierge? What's the deal? Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I used to have to land 30 people in Shanghai per month in my earlier career, and that was a whole weekend of me like living by the airport. I used to literally book one and be the guy, hey, how you doing? Find somebody to do that there. Approach hotel partners where you can get preferential rates on block bookings and get them in there. And then just go around to your office currently now. Where are people living? Collect good agencies and landlord numbers, and then provide that as like one kind of welcome pack document when they land.
Yeah, very good. Your thoughts on this, Katrina?
I'm going to probably go one step ahead on the timeline of it, and probably think more about the culture that you're bringing somebody into in your company. I think there's this really weird view of culture that it's some kind of static thing that belongs to your company, and anyone that comes into it has to be a culture fit to your company. It's really important when you're hiring people, particularly if they've just come to a new country to relocate, that you're adapting your culture around the people that you're bringing into it. And that also goes for your leaders and your people managers, adapting their ways of working. Because again, our experience being with employees in 21 countries, culturally, expectations from employees around how they're managed can be really different. And something that might make somebody in the UK who's born and raised in the UK feel supported and valued could actually make somebody from another culture feel really alienated. So that's a bit of work that I think you need to do. But everything Akbar said is absolutely right around the logistics, but helping them land in a safe place into your company and feel part of the fabric of the company is a two-way street.
I think that is such a great additional point. It almost strikes me it's like a part two to this. Like, how do you onboard? How do you work with people from different environments, different cultures? Because absolutely the case. People have what is okay in one context is different from another, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a huge distance. Like, if you've ever worked with anybody in the US very closely, very, very different set of behaviors, very different set of expectations compared to people in the UK, even across to Ireland, to Scotland, London to North. These types of things actually make a difference. So I think our cultural fluency generally needs to upgrade, and I wonder whether this ends up being actually one of the premium skills of management at some point, to be able to navigate how people operate in their own way, whether it be from a personal trait issue or from cultural aspects as well. Okay, cool. And by the way, just a quick story. I remember actually recruiting one guy, now a good friend of mine, from Japan back in the day. I don't know how I did it. Oh yeah, he had a German passport. But I actually did concierge the dude. I was like literally hanging out with him for 2 weeks. And it was like trying to find a place for him to live and all this kind of stuff, doing all this, almost like a mini wife for him. But yeah, it was quite good fun to do. But it was like, wow, a big chunk of work. So presumably, as companies do this more regularly or have kind of see the value of it, they'll end up establishing protocols, have documentation and support and all the rest of it. Okay, we've got to go to the questions, folks, because we're running out of time. Let's order these by votes. So folks, ask your questions and then vote on what you want to see. So let's go here with Stephanie J. Thomas. I think you've already answered this, Katrina, so we'll skip that one. Okay, hang on, what's happening here? This is flipping. I'll tell you what, it's more questions being asked. Let's answer the question from. All right, it's been deleted. I don't know how that's happened. I beg your pardon. I'm done answering that. Okay, Deirdre's asking, what is Katrina's making a good case for remote hiring. In what cases would relocation make more sense for a company? Now, we're leaving aside the jobs where someone needs to be physically there, so that's obviously the case. But in those conditions where it's digital, the work is generally doable anywhere. Under what circumstances would relocation be better? Akbar, let's go to you on this because you've had experience directly on that.
Yeah, so an important point is if you want them locked in as under an employee of record or as close as possible like experience, or you letting them run themselves as a contractor or through their own limited business. Through the last section, they're automatically going to be able to be more fluid. And then you should be like, I don't mind where you live because technically you're invoicing per month to me and I wish you all the best, but still maintain your levels of work skill irrespective of wherever you are. So as if they're going to take away that barrier to entry to them moving, yes, you can let them move around and relocate from where you initially hired them.
Yeah. Okay. So it's about the terms of employment is a determining factor with that. Okay. I think there's more to say, but there's also more questions to answer. So let's go straight through it. Robin, I'm going to skip that one if that's okay, because I think that's basically a remote versus sort of in-person issue. Let's talk about another one from Deirdre. What support beyond relocation should we be offering our talent? So let's say, again, like you just give them a stipend, say here's $2K, go find yourself a place. What things can companies do to make that transition easier? Hamza, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, from experience, I've seen a lot of companies, they go the extra mile. So it's more about getting the visa, getting the immigration side of things done, then the flights, then the housing, then, for example, a localized full relocation package would entail to what kind of medical registration you can do, where you can get your driving license, conducting a right to work check if needed, what kind of local restaurants. We have case managers hand-to-hand basis. Let's say someone's relocated from India, for example, they've relocated to London. The case manager, whoever the UK case manager is, they'd be able to recommend, hey, there's Indian communities, Indian restaurants, alongside these XYZ areas within London. You know, you can get your local food out there, you can meet people out there, you can get these events. So it's basically like giving them the ease, the benefit of like integrating themselves within the new culture within UK. So yeah, I think we can go that extra mile, whether it's housing support, flight support, even pick and drop from the airport, you know, and small things that go a long way. Like I said, a driving license. It's not something that everyone would need. Or if it's questions regarding, hey, how can we easily move around London? You know, London's train system, our buses system, it's crazy. But it's also easy as well. And these are small things that we can just give them that extra additional benefit.
Do you know what? You just reminded me. It's like basic stuff that we take for granted. But I remember going to Australia, and I wasn't even relocating. I was just there for a holiday. But the Airbnb I was in, like one of the nice touches which I remember is that they actually left in Melbourne. I was at Melbourne have like a transport system where you have a card, and the card is basically like it gives you anywhere. But they actually had that on the table to say, look, use this card. It's got X amount of dollars in it. Just go and travel. Don't worry about having to navigate something that's going to take you time to work out. And it was like that actually just takes the anxiety down. It didn't cost much, $20, $30, whatever. But if you're relocating someone, just make sure they can move around and do basic things without they'll learn it eventually. But the first period is so important. Okay, so lots of things basically. Okay, we're running out of time, but we're going to answer one more question from Stephanie, which is Stephanie's saying, I've had trouble convincing hiring managers in Europe that hiring Africa is easier than we think. So there's this perception again that it's a very difficult thing to do. How do we bridge that gap of confidence? How do we sort of convince without the data? Katrina, you actually said there was data. So can you tell us a little bit about this? Like, what is this, and is it available for people to access, or what?
Yeah, so we've created now, I don't know if it's answering 100% the question in the same way. What we've looked at mapping for clients is what is the skills penetration and availability in different countries, across Africa and other countries as well, of course. And we use our own tool for doing that. So we use a tool called Yoke, which basically looks across 54 different structured and unstructured publicly available data sources, everything that's on LinkedIn, all social media, communities like GitHub, etc., everything that you can imagine, and pulls that data in. So you're probably getting, depending on the country, anywhere from about 96, 97% penetration into the available talent pool, down to maybe about 60, 70% in some countries. China would be one of the lower ones, just in terms of the use of some of those social platforms and tools, etc. But it gives us, even at 60%, it's good enough data, and that's an anomaly. So we're able to produce really great data, particularly for tech, product, data, and digital talent, where those people typically are more engaged in those types of online communities. To give you a view, what that doesn't answer, Stephanie, is your question about how do you then convince a hiring manager to go, let's go fishing in this country. And the only answer as a lifetime recruiter that I could give you to that is by getting great candidates in front of them and prepping the heck out of those candidates, particularly where you need to work through any points of cultural difference that might emerge between those candidates and that hiring manager if they're not experienced in international recruitment. So it's a bit more work on your part, but like anything, get those first couple of great candidates across the line, and it tends to go from there.
Yeah, maybe one of the ways to do it is actually to target those particularly difficult roles that basically you're just going to be digging forever trying to find the person locally in the UK. Managers are already at that point, they're going to be very sensitive to other opportunities. That may be the place that you start. And then, as I think Akbar's mentioned earlier as well, that's where you start getting the candidates in. You can use tooling, you can use screen capture type stuff. You can actually create your own data in that way. And then that can help managers be a bit more confident. Okay, folks, we are running out of time here. I hope everyone has enjoyed this conversation. It's been absolutely fascinating. I think there's so much more to talk about. I'm particularly interested in how do you manage a a very cross-cultural team. So imagine if you actually did succeed in having an agnostic attitude to recruitment in terms of geography, you will end up having a very mixed team in terms of culture and all the rest of it. So great news for diversity and all the rest of it, but what is the management responsibility? How do you make sure everyone is working together in the right way and communicating in the right way? I think that could be a really good topic to do next time around. Okay, that's about it, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments below if you have. I think there'll be something sent out to you as well after this show to give you a little bit more of a template, as well as those two offers from OfferZen and Localyze as well, if you want to take it on a bit further. Okay, let's say thank you to our guests. So Akbar Karanga, great to see you. Thank you very much for joining. Katrina Hutchison O'Neill, always a pleasure to see you. Great to see you. And Hamza Hussein, great to meet you and great to get your contributions as well. Thank you so much for laying out sort of the legislative environment and making it very clear that it's a lot easier for UK employers to hire talent from Africa. And thank you, everyone. Great to see you all, and thank you for watching.